Okay, welcome everybody to another Nova Scribes. Yay! This one's going to be a good one. We're doing our fourth author talk in the series, and this time we're bringing in Heather Martinez. Let me go ahead and spotlight your video, Heather. We'll have yours and mine open just for a little bit. So Heather, thanks for coming to Nova Scribes. No, Heather Martinez was actually one of the founding members of Nova Scribes back early in the day when we didn't want to drive all the way into DC to do the meetup, the DC graphic facilitation meetup. And we said, let's just do this in Northern Virginia. We'll call it Nova Scribes, right? Northern Virginia, get it? So Heather, I got to ask, knowing exactly what you were getting into, why in the world did you want to do a Nova Scribes? I mean, because like, you know what this is all about. You'd think you'd know better.
What do you mean? Why would I want to do a Nova Scribes?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Because I want to see all my friends.
that's a
And I
really
saw
good reason.
Dana did hers, and I was like, I want to be like Dana. So I signed up immediately. So I'm so glad you dialed in, Dana, because she's one of the people that actually helped me make this book happen. If it weren't for her or Carlos Valdez Stapina, I wouldn't be here today talking to you about that book.
So we're talking about lettering journey. So I didn't realize that Dana had something to do with it. So Dana, Dana, get in here.
Dana, get in here.
What did you have to do with this? I didn't realize that there was a backstory there.
Yeah, that was a great backstory. So all three of us were in different stages of writing a book. And so, I mean, I just felt like there was some really good synergy. But I mean, Heather and Carlos never met in person. So we were just online, but we had a group called GSDS, which meant Get Shit Done Sanely, which is a little counterintuitive, but we met every 2 weeks and checked in with each other about what we were doing and kept each other going. And like many things, life came in and we had health issues and life issues, and it was crazy, but we all got to the end game in different ways. And Heather took off and did a European master tour and scribing around the world. And Carlos and I were left behind in America, just scratching at the window.
Yeah, it was quite a journey. Let me just say, also being on like the receiving ends of those like emails that you would send out, like I was feeling super jealous watching the life that you had put together for yourself. But let's talk about it. So
Yeah.
jumping
you,
into the
Dana.
journey then. Thank you, Dana. So jumping into the journey then. So like Heather, you and I have known each other for a long time. And I like to think that like I was there when you decided to start focusing on lettering as a practice within the context of graphic recording and graphic facilitation.
You were.
Right? Yeah. So how did you, because there's so many different components of graphic facilitation and graphic recording. There's the facilitation aspect of it, the group aspect. You could focus on anything. You could focus on drawing, illustration, layout, color use. There's so much in there. Why did you decide that, okay, for me, like I'm really going to dive into this lettering thing? What was it about that in particular?
It's all your fault. It was all Brian's
Well,
fault. So what happened was
I hope not.
once he hired, well, I don't think, well, you actually didn't hire me. That's right. Once I got to Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
and Brian and I just happened to be on the same team as one another. We had talked before. He took me to a meetup. And I think it was the second meetup or maybe the first or second meetup, and someone anyway, we were told to stand up in the front of the room. All the professionals stand at the front of the room, and the people that weren't professional visual practitioners got to ask them questions. And I was like, I don't belong up here. Like, I've been in this job for like a month. And they said, no, get up there. And one of the participants said, well, I have a question for Heather. How do you do this work without being nervous? And I said, I don't. I'm pretty much scared the entire time I'm graphic recording.
I remember
And
that.
they said, well, that's not very helpful. What are you going to do to help me feel better about it? And I said, well, I think I'm just going to focus on my strengths. And then they said, well, what are your strengths? And I literally turned around and I was looking at the chart behind me. And I'm sure Brian was on one side and maybe Trent or somebody else was on the other side. And we had all been drawing pictures and writing letters. And I turned back around and I said, my lettering, because it was better than my drawing. And from that moment forward, every time we went to a meetup, someone would say, hey, can you show me some lettering tricks? So in 2016, I literally took all of my money that I had for professional development and I studied with master calligraphers, sign painters, and graffiti artists. And I started translating everything that I was learning from them into Neuland markers, the different hierarchies, the different lettering styles. And it didn't take me long to realize that everything that they were all doing narrowed down to 3 different types of nibs: the wedge nib, the monoline round nib, some people call it a bullet nib, and the brush marker. And once I saw every single lettering style that I was learning, you know, narrowed down to those three, I had a formula. And so then I just started doing all of that. And I have to say that my lettering, even when I'm working really quickly, is not great, but my confidence level is better knowing these different lettering styles.
Had you studied lettering or calligraphy or typeface or any of that before graphic recording?
You know, I was a graphic designer, so I knew typefaces, but I really didn't understand how they were made. Um, I didn't even know the entire anatomy of them at that time. But no,
Yeah.
I hadn't studied any of that. I just had kind of okay handwriting.
Yeah, so I remember your stories from when you were going out studying with all of these masters. My favorite one, didn't you stay with like some guy who wore overalls and lived in a trailer and you slept on a cot or something? Am I making that up or did that
You're
actually
making
happen?
part of that up.
All
Yeah. So
right.
that's Mike Meyer. And he
Oh, that's a
has us.
guy. Okay.
Mike Meyer, he has us sleep in his studio. At the time, he was in Mazeppa, Minnesota, and he built these lofts, and we would sleep in the studio. And yes, he wore coveralls, and we drank a lot of beer. Like there was no water, just beer. That's all we did. He smoked cigars, and yeah, that was a good time.
So what did you learn from him? What did he teach you?
Sign painter.
Sign
And
painter.
so, yeah, so he didn't teach me sign painter the way we do it with the markers. He
Mhm.
taught me with the real sign painting brush. And so, like any other class that I ever take from calligraphers or sign painters, is after the class, I would go home and I would try it with Neuland markers. And so I brought my #1 brush marker with me. And I would, at the end of the day, I would take all my sketch notes. I'd sketch note the entire time. I had, probably about 40 pages worth of sketch notes, and then I would practice with my #1 brush. And at the very end, I said, "Look, I know what you taught me was great. I'll probably go home and buy all the one shot and buy all of the brushes and everything. But let me show you what I can do right now." And I just whipped out an entire exemplar using the #1 brush marker. So
Did you ever get any static from these? Because I'm on the sign painter Facebook group. And these guys, I know, right? Like these guys, they're serious about what they do.
I
It's
don't
like
show my work to them.
well, that was kind of like where I was going with this. Like, did you ever tell anybody that you were learning from that you were going to take what they were teaching you and like put it into markers?
Absolutely, because I wanted them to know and I wanted to get their permission. So I said,
Okay.
"Look, this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I want to be able to teach other visual practitioners how to do this as well." Nobody's really given me grief. Mike has been incredibly supportive. I was just published in his book last year. He had a sign painter's book where I actually published minuscules and majuscules. So usually Neuland hand is all written in capitals, but I came up with a lowercase version and that was published in his book. I should probably make a class for that and let other people know how to do that. And then Carol Dubosh is my calligraphy teacher. And I've learned from lots of different calligraphy masters, but Carol Dubosh is the one that I've probably taken a couple dozen classes from, and she supports everything that I do. And she's actually the reason why we have a scholarship at Let's Letter Together. So
Cool. Very
yeah.
exciting. Well, so let's see. Let me ask you a couple of questions. So translating all of that into a book, right? What made you decide that you were actually going to go off and do that? Like what got it to the point where you're going to take all of this resident knowledge that you had and then translate it into a book?
So for me, I didn't think that I had a book in me.
Mhm.
It was just, I didn't even know it was there. And once we got on the road, and this was after I left Washington, D.C., I started seeing lettering styles in everything. And I went, oh, I'm going to start jotting these down. And in my sketchbook, I would have the attributes. I'd write a letter. Maybe I'd even take a picture, do some sketches, write down the attributes, come up with a small alphabet. And after I had a few dozen of those, it was like, this is really kind of fun. Like I should make a book out of this. So when I landed in Canada for my second artisan residency, when we went across North America, we did artist residencies the entire way. And so once we got up to Canada, I was sitting and I was listening to a podcast with Brandy Agerbeck, and she was your last author.
Mhm.
And I was listening to her talk about her book. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. And then she gave a piece of advice. And I think she gave this when she talked the last time. And that was, she said, if you're going to make a book, don't make your first book the most important book.
Yeah.
Do the
Yeah.
easy book first. And so what I did is right then and there, I wrote How to Letter Like a Sign Painter. And it was a little zine. And I think it was like 12 pages or something, or 20 pages or something like that. It's really small. And so I made that zine, and I made it, and I just kind of had it in my back pocket, really didn't do anything with it. And then when we traveled across the country, I went, you know what? I think that if I can make one of these, I can make like 10 of these and turn it into a book. And so that's how that book started. And so I just kept pulling all of these different lettering styles, and there must have been probably 30 or 40, but I only was able to get 8 of them in the book, because if for those of you who have written a book, at some point you have to stop and make a book.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. So going back to your sign painter and what you weren't able to fit in the book, I got to tell you, one of the things that I always keep with me in my kit is your yellow zine that says sign painter. You got one of those handy? I can grab mine if you don't.
Oh, you'll have to grab yours. I
I'll
think
grab
mine's
mine
my
in a minute,
studio.
because it's an amazing resource of all these different variations on the sign painter lettering style. And
Yeah.
for me, it's become one of my go-to lettering styles that I just pull out. It's fantastic for headers. Those are the kind of like the big text that you want to grab. You got lots of different lettering styles. What are the ones that you just go back to, the kind of the nuts and bolts ones that you use all the time?
So I would say in general, there's 3 that I use when I'm graphic recording. So it's Neuland Hand for my titles, Architect, or a blend between Architect and Sign Painter for my content. And then I would say some kind of brush lettering for any parts that I really want to do something expressive, something where it's where I'm trying to emphasize something, right? So I try to keep it basic to those 3, and all 3 of those, well, actually the Neuland Hand isn't really scalable. You're pretty much going to do it just one size. So that's my title.
Mhm.
But both the brush lettering and the Architect, those are both very scalable. So you can use any marker to go up and down in those lettering styles. So
Those are the ones that
yeah,
you keep going back to, brush lettering and architects.
I would say Architect, Sign Painter, that kind of melds together.
Mhm.
That's my content lettering style. And then the brush lettering is the expressive one. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
One of the ones I think that you really put on the map is Neuland Hand, not
Mhm.
to be confused with the markers of the same name.
That's right.
So have you ever, it's the same name as the markers, but it's a different thing, right? Like it has nothing to do with the markers.
No, it has nothing to do with the markers at all. And I love that, because when I first found Neuland Hand, I thought, that's interesting. What's the story behind that? And so Rudolph Cook,
Mhm.
in 1923, I believe it was, he cut out letters using tin snips into tin, and then turned that into a typeface that was then turned into a font. And from that time, calligraphers have been using their broad edge markers to translate that particular lettering style into what they wanted to create. And so, it has nothing to do with it. So when I first came out with the Neuland Hand exemplar that I
Yeah.
taught at the 2016, I think it was DC IFEP, Guido said, well, that's very convenient that you named your lettering style Neuland Hand. And I said, no. And then I told him about Rudolph Cook, and he was like, oh, okay, tell me more. And at that time, it was the exact same time that that they came out with their hand lettering learning pad, the big flip chart.
Mhm.
And he just had one, I think it was just one type of lines on it. And that was based off of someone else who had been teaching some lettering, workshop lettering through Neuland. So Guido brought in all of the papers, and we beta tested all of those papers. And about a month later, I came back to him and I said, if this were my journey,
Mhm.
I would create the practice pages to look like this, to go with these particular markers. And so that's where that hand lettering, the big flip chart came from. And then a few months later, he came out with the smaller hand lettering learning pad, the one that's to go.
Mhm.
And so he used that at a conference, and I said, well, send me a bunch of those. And he did. And then I started using them in my classes.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So can we hit the book? Is that all right?
Yeah, let's
All
talk
right,
about it.
cool. So how did you, I mean, just like the small stuff. So it's a square book. How did you decide to come up with that as the format? Was there, because you got a reason
Okay.
for everything you do,
I do. There is a reason for everything. And the book is square because originally I was a medium format photographer, which meant that I loved shooting in square format and I wanted a square book. And actually, I think originally I wanted to have a long wide book so that I could get all of my letters on there at 100%. But I went, it's really kind of too floppy to do that and
Mhm.
to be able to hold it. So I stayed square. So yeah, stayed square. I like square. I
All
didn't
right.
want a long, narrow book because you don't get as much real estate, lengthwise. But
Yeah.
before we get into that,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I don't confuse people too much. But did you know that there's actually 3 versions of my book?
Well, there's a German one. I saw that one on the website, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So the one you have is my book. The insides are black and white. You can get that from me or on Amazon or anywhere where books are sold. The second one is there is a color version that Neuland put out that comes with the kits and that they sell. So if you want a full color version,
Whoa.
you
Did
can
not
get
know
that from
that.
Neuland.
Okay.
So
That's super cool.
they put out the money to do that. I wanted to make sure that I had a little bit less of an expensive version. It was black and white. It didn't have to be full color for anybody that wanted to order it anywhere. I didn't want to limit the number of people that could purchase the book just by going to Neuland. I wanted it everywhere. So, and then the third one, yes, it just got translated into German. Funny story about this one. They asked me because the book is, again, it's written, most every single lettering style in here is at 100% because I know that when I get lettering
Oh,
books, it's
got it.
hard for me to translate to the size. And so every single ductus has me writing around it. And they said, we want you to rewrite everything that's in there, but in German.
Okay. What were
And
you
they
saying
gave
about ducks just a second ago?
ductus,
Ductus.
ductus that
What is a
tells us
ductus?
what order the stroke is and what direction it goes in.
Oh, cool. And when you say it's at 100%, I should be able to grab, that looks like it's written with a big one, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I should be able to like take that book, hold it next to the paper, grab my big one and just, map it out and it should be the same scale. Is that right?
Exactly.
Super
Exactly.
cool.
It is. And at the front of each one of these chapters, I have the attributes. And in this case, it's telling you how many nib widths high. So if you were to just mark that off, that's going to be the height of your letters for that particular lettering style.
Neat.
Yep.
The pen scale. That's
Exactly.
really cool. All
So
right.
all of this was handwritten. And they said, we want you to handwrite all that again in German. And I got about 2 hours in and then did a little calculation and went, this is going to take me like 300 hours.
Yeah.
We're not doing that. So I made a font. So anything you see that would have been handwritten in this book is actually a font that I created. And I just gave them the font. It was like, okay, that took me like a day. Here's the font, go.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and so you open up the book, the first thing you see is this amazing map. So who is Flo and what does she have to do with this?
So Flo is my 1947 teardrop trailer that I picked up in Kansas. My parents were refurbishing her and I picked her up in Kansas. So we started in New York, or well, we started in DC, went up to New York for an artist residency, came down to Kansas, picked up Flo. And then that's when we went up to Canada, down the West Coast, back. We went back and forth a bunch of times. And so Flo is who we traveled with the whole way.
So what, this is just like you and the Ray and Ray in the back of a teardrop trailer?
So me and Ray were driving the Jeep and we were hauling the teardrop trailer. Yep.
Wow. Okay. How long were you on the road for?
We were on the road, I think 9 months.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You're
We
still
lived,
married after that.
we did. We stayed married. Yeah. That was
Okay.
actually the best. We still look back at that and it was just the best time.
That is
Yeah.
so cool. So I mean, let's start at the beginning, right? So this is like that connection that you made before, right here, where
Mhm.
it's like, okay, here's the calligraphy tools, and pretty much what you see here,
Yep.
you can accomplish that down here, right?
Absolutely.
Now this one, you mentioned your your round nib, you mentioned their art marker, the brush, you mentioned the chisel tip, and then you got this guy right there. So what's that?
That's the big one, or that's the fat one.
The fat one.
Yep, the 20 millimeter or the 50 millimeter fat one marker. This one
Okay.
happens to, I put, looks like I put walnut ink in it because you can put any kind of ink in it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't look like a Neuland marker. Is that what is that?
No, Neuland brands it as the fat one, but it's actually a Montana marker, and it's
Okay.
yeah. So it's a graffiti marker.
So is
Graffiti
this one of
artists
these
use.
things you learn from graffiti artists then?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay.
So I took this to them. That's how I got in to the graffiti world. As I went there with my markers, and they were like, "Oh." So, and I told them, I said, "I don't do spray cans. I only do markers." And then I showed them all my markers, and I gave them a lot of markers, and they're like, "Okay, come with us." And they started teaching me about graffiti. That's
So
how I
how,
learned
like,
how to
did
do
you
it
have to do
fast.
like a secret handshake or something? Like it sounds like very,
I'm not gonna
what's the
tell.
password? All right, fine.
I'm not telling.
You're right, because this is being recorded. It's probably a bad idea. All right. So the first style that you really go deep in here is brick. So tell me, like, what's the story behind brick? Because this is one I'd actually never seen you do before this. Yeah,
No,
brick wall.
I'm going to flip through really quickly. I don't know that you've seen any of these because these all came from the road.
Okay.
Yeah, all of these were from the road. So this happened to be that I was going, Ray and I were driving, we were in New York, we were in upstate New York, and we were driving through an alley near Albany or in Albany. And there was just this beautiful alley. I don't know what it is. I love alleys, I guess. And so we were in this alley, and I said, I jumped out, and I had this poster, Be Visible Right Now. That's a poster that I did for Neuland. On the back has a bunch of tips and tricks about lettering. And I said, "Take my picture." And I just held it up, and he took my picture. So, and what the reason why it's called brick, I mean, that was it. But I remember having a dream. It was probably second or third night that we were at the artist residency. And that's when I said, "You know what? I think I want to find, I think I want to make a new lettering style that has a slab serif in
Mhm.
it." And that's where all those little serifs, but they're really fat serifs. They're chunky,
Right.
chunky serifs that are showing up in the lettering style. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Yeah, one of my favorite parts is this next page where it actually gets into practice strokes.
Mhm.
And anytime somebody says, "Oh, can you help me out with my lettering?" What I try to tell them is like, look, the best thing that you can do, especially say if you're using a chisel tip marker, is just to be consistent. If it's straight up and down, keep it there. If it's left and right, keep it there. And what I like about this is that you've actually got these little lines here that say, all right, hold the nib like this,
Mhm.
so that you can actually see where to go.
Yeah.
If you were offering advice to somebody who's never really thought about the way that they put a marker on a piece of paper onto a flip chart, right?
Mhm.
Just to get a little bit more consistency, just to, what would you tell them?
Well, that's tough. In terms of consistency, I don't know that I would always go to keep the marker in the same place. You certainly
Okay.
can. That's one way. It depends on the style. If they're just wanting their handwriting, absolutely, right? So
Mhm.
when it comes to handwriting, there's like 5 things that I would say. The first thing is that make sure that the tool that you're using is the right proportion for how big you want to write, right? So we might use a really big marker but write too small, and then all of our spaces fill up. Or we might write too big, and we can't see it from across the room. It's sort of like writing with a pencil. You'd never be able to see it, right?
Mhm.
So there's that. But as other things that are in terms of consistency are, and really the great thing to do is to practice your vowels, because those are the most used letters. But make sure that your vowels especially are consistent. Make your A's, your E's, your I's, your O's, your U's. Really, the A's and E's can vary a little bit, so be consistent with those. This is sort of like a secret decoder ring when you're reading someone else's handwriting, especially written live in front of folks, the graphic recorders in the room, or whoever is writing in front of other people. Your letters need to be consistent with each other. Always write those letters in the same way. It's easy to kind of change it up while you go, but it doesn't make it read. It lessens the readability, I would say.
Okay.
Another thing is your spacing, and that's one of the hardest things we can do. It's so hard to teach spacing because we've got so many different variations of the different types of letters and variations of 2 letters being next to each other, that you've got to get the spacing right. Then there's the baseline. Unless you're doing it on purpose, unless you're bouncing or rotating your letters on purpose, keep it on the baseline. Keep it as straight as you can. And that also, I just mentioned rotating, keep the slopes the same. So whether it's all of your stems are straight up, or if you're doing it at a slant, keep them the same throughout. Those are the main consistency pieces. But yeah, for the most part, people just right off the street, or if you're facilitating a meeting and you happen to have some markers there and people are picking them up and start writing, to them it's like there's just ink coming out of the end of a stick, right? So they don't really know how to index. They don't understand the angle, or maybe not even their grip with some of these bigger markers. It
Mhm.
feels different to them. So I would say for them, yeah, just hold it and keep it there and just stay there.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's a couple words you used. I want to make sure that I know what they are. So one of them is, you said was it the counter? Is that right?
hmm Yep.
What's the
So that's
counter?
going to be the space inside of your letter. So inside of an O,
Uh-huh.
the triangle inside of an A, the
So like
inside
the negative space within these letters. Is that
exactly.
right? Okay,
Those are your
cool.
counter spaces. And when we're writing lowercase a's and e's, sometimes we might write too small and those will fill in.
And then you used another word, which was index. What was
Mhm.
that? What does
Yeah.
it mean to
So
index?
this really gets to, let me see if I can can't find a big one. All my markers are down in my studio. So I'll use this fat one as an example. And I had a little extra ink on the edge there. So notice that I can either hold it. This is called 0 degree or 90 degree. So indexing is deciding which angle do you want it at and then keeping it there. So as you know, with things like the brush marker, this is really easy because the nib is the same no matter which way you turn it, right? So
Mhm.
we can put our fingers in those ergonomic grips and it's fine. It's like that's the way it's always going to stay. But when we pick up something that doesn't have those ergonomic grips, it's totally round, even in the twin ones, they're totally round. There's no ergonomic grip. We have to think about what angle do we want this at when we go to write. And we have to keep it that way. So that's called indexing. So what you are all seeing here, oh, I'm really glad that he stopped on this page. So you could probably barely see it because the text is so small, but I'm actually giving sort of a caveat for lefties. So is anybody in the house a lefty?
What I
All
miss?
right. I don't see anybody raising their hand unless I'm missing it because I don't have it on gallery view, but any lefties in the house? No. Well, the odds are that there wouldn't be with this many people. But anyway, so for lefties, it's going to be a little bit different. So of course they're writing with their left hand, so they're pushing a lot. So the ductus may be different. Where I'm showing you going one direction, it might go in a different direction for lefties. Also, if you know a lefty, send them my way because I have a lefty portal that gives all kinds of lefty tips. Love working with lefties. I myself used to be a lefty and I can write with both hands. So I love to work with lefties.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here's the sign painter zine.
Now be gentle. This was when I first learned how to letter. So
Oh, no,
it's
no,
not
no.
my
This is,
best work.
again, this is fantastic because to me, it's like, this is so clear. It's like, I know exactly, it's like step by step, paint by, color by numbers. What's that called? A dot to dot, connect the dots type thing.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
really, really, really clear on how to do all of this stuff. And what I like is the letter forms they build in terms of their complexity, right?
Yeah.
So, like the S is like the last one you do because of how hard it is.
And that's an ugly S. So
It's
come
a
to me and
fine S.
I'll teach you to make a better looking S. Well,
I
it's
like
just
your S.
it was a different way at a different time.
But then there's the thing that was revolutionary to me about this is that, you might as well, once you've got this, right, and you know how to do this lettering style with an art marker, with a brush tip,
Mhm.
try it with a number one, or even like
That's
a
right.
Grove charter or a big one, right?
Yeah.
So, the idea is that you can use the same lettering style with different nibs, you'll get different effects that are there, which is like,
That's
well,
right.
just by switching the marker out, yeah, it's like I just picked up another lettering style, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so that's one of the top 5 ways to level up your lettering. That's the handout that you get in one of my classes. And it's about leveling up your lettering by doing different lettering styles with completely different markers. Because what that does is it makes you really focus on the form and compensate with the type of marker that you have. Okay. So what does any of that mean? Well, I'm gonna direct that to a great question that I think Mike asked to talk about. Let's see. What did it say? Tell us about the kit that comes with the color version of the book. Do you mind if I share my screen, Brian?
No, please do.
Okay, so Neuland asked me to come up with a kit that would help people with their lettering. And they said, you can choose any marker, you can choose any color, all of that jazz. And, you know, a lot of the ambassadors got to do something like this, but this was specifically for hand lettering. And so they brought it with the book, and you get a hand lettering learning pad. You get that fat one, but it's a 20 millimeter. And you get a big one, a number 1 wedge, a number 1 round, and a number 1 brush, because I want you to have all 3 of those in the number 1 size, and then a fine 1 round nib. It's also got a little instructional booklet with it. But what's key here are the colors that I've done here are totally on purpose, and I teach you how to write the letters with these markers. Then I show you how to use the colors with those specific markers. So the fat one is really used for title lettering styles, and yellow, brilliant yellow, not that yellow that you can barely see, but the nice brilliant yellow. And then you're going to outline it with the outliner. You can do a drop shadow with the gray marker, and then you can embellish it with the red or the blue. So I've got a whole system of how to use hierarchy and the colors and the lettering styles with it.
Amazing.
Any
You know,
other questions, Mike? Yeah.
it looks like Dana had one. What is the secret to a good S?
Visualization. So I'm
Ooh.
sorry to have to say that for those of you who suffer from aphantasia.
What's aphantasia?
Aphantasia is the inability to visualize. So if you can't see it in your mind's eye, if everybody right now imagined an apple, if you closed your eyes and imagined an apple, could you actually see an apple? And if you don't see the apple, you may have, there's different versions of aphantasia. And I do know some graphic recorders who have aphantasia. When I came across them, I was, wow, because when I graphic record and I hear something, I see all these images and I just pick one and then I write it. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you demonstrate an S, maybe a block letter S?
I'm happy to demonstrate all kinds of S's. Let me grab one of my sheets here, one of my pads. Okay, and I'll probably need a couple of different types of markers to be able to show this with. Okay. So block letter S's, I don't do a lot of block letter, but Neuland hand is similar, I would say. And let's see. And again, it all depends on the style. So if you have a favorite style that you would like me to demonstrate, I'm happy to do that. And the S's, I tend to say that the S's are the hardest until I met someone who their name began with S, and she says, I wish you'd quit telling people that. I had really good S's till I kept hearing you say that. And I really do believe in having a positive attitude when you write. You get to see my really messy desk. Okay. So S's. I'll do a couple for you, and I'm going to start out with a really simple Roman S. And I'm actually going to write it with this fine one just because it's a round nib. And so for the most part, if you think about an S being like a snowman, so if you wanted to draw a bit of a snowman or a letter or a number 8, the top part of your S is oftentimes smaller than the bottom part of your S. Now I just threw in a serif there. You certainly don't need a serif by any means, but I just wanted you to see where it started and where it stopped. And so a Roman S is going to look like that. This one's pretty equal, but for the most part, it's just slightly smaller at the top than it is at the bottom. Okay. Now, when we get into, say, like a sign painter S, it's actually opposite. It's bigger at the top and smaller at the bottom. And the shape of it is shaped, if you were to think of like a triangle sitting on top of an oval, it's going to look a little bit like that. And if I were to write it down here, think of it as like a person sort of kneeling. They're going to look like that. Okay. But a block letter S is a little tougher because, and I can show you a few of these. So normally this is going to be really big. And I might not be able to see it too well, but let's try. So normally a Neuland S is going to look like this. It's pretty much just a line. Oops, let's do that again. A line with a couple of bends in it. And it can be pretty abrupt, or you can start at 0 degrees and kind of be like this. But that's not much of an S, is it? There's just not much there. So if you're thinking of a block S, here's the key piece, especially when you're writing really big, or even with a marker that has a flat nib. I'm going to try to find one that's smaller here. That you've got a whole lot of business going on in between. Let me lock this in. So when we do most lettering styles, 4 to 5 nib widths high. So I'm holding my marker. So I'm just writing with the broad edge, starting from the baseline and going up. Because if I were to do it any smaller than that, there's just too much business going on in this S. So it's really hard to do that block letter. And sometimes what I do is I break the baseline. So here I tried to get it all within those 5. So a lot of times when I'm writing, especially with a big number 1, is I don't mind breaking this baseline down here, or even a little bit at the top, because optically rounded letters are going to look smaller and we can make them just slightly bigger. It's kind of hard to write with this little number 1. I wish I had a big one with me, but they're all down in my studio. But so I don't know if that answers your question, Dana, or what I can help you with.
Dana, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem I have, Heather, is that oftentimes if I'm doing a title, and I don't want to get too far into this, this is like not worth the conversation.
No,
But
it
if
all
I'm
is.
doing a title and I'm outlining in black and I'm going to be coloring it in, S is where I like grind to a halt and go,
Right.
oh God.
So like an outline.
Exactly. So it's an outline S. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, Brian, the first time I graphic recorded for him, he gave me the title and there were 4 S's in it.
Oh,
and I
God.
screamed at him. I was like, you gave me a title with 4 S's. What's
It
wrong
was the
with
name of
you?"
their company. I couldn't do much about it.
Right. So when it comes to doing like really, really big letters, and this is on, let's see if we can find it. Maybe we can have a race and figure out who can find it first. This lettering style
yeah.
called Harbor, if you're constructing an S and you want to do an outline, this actually got inspired a little bit. I think I already wrote this, but then I got to answer the
And
question.
let me just say, if you've got the book, we're on page 82.
Hey, thank you. Way to go, Brian. Way to stay on top of those page numbers. So I think it was Nevada Lane. I was putting some stuff out like this, and she says, "How are you getting your whites so white? What marker are you using?" And I said, I'm just using a pencil, and then I just go over it with the outliner. But what I'm doing is I'm taking 2 pencils and putting them on either side of the fat one, like is seen here, and I'm using that to write with. Right. And so I'm just making the outline of the letter. So I would write a letter S, and then I would outline the whole thing with the black outliner markers. So here's an S right here. Yep. Now, is that a cheat? I'd like to think of it as a hack. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything such as a cheat anymore. I used to.
Yeah.
There was this one guy that I really, really admired. His graphic recording, and then he told me he just took him home and redrew him in studio for like 6 hours. I was like, and my first reaction was, well, that's cheating. But then it's like, well, wait a minute now, if they're willing to pay for it, why not?
Exactly.
So
Or if you're willing to do it, right?
yeah.
And
Let me ask you a question. You were demonstrating using a bunch of different markers just now. Has anything new come out that you wish you had when you were writing this book?
yes, the big one, art marker, the largest marker in the world. It's the largest brush nib marker in the world. So if anywhere, and they don't pay me to say that, but kind of, no, they don't pay me, but anywhere in the book that you see, and at the front of every single chapter, like I said, I have my attributes, but I also tell you what markers to use. So this is the marker that's not in the book, but anywhere where you see a brush nib marker, you can replace it with this and go bigger. Now, Neuland has 5 different sizes of brush nib markers. So that means we can go from sketchnote all the way up to wall size. And they're all the most versatile. You can do the most different types of lettering styles with that brush nib.
Okay, I can think of 3. Which are the 2 that I'm missing?
I don't know. Which is the 3 that you know?
Well, there's the fine one, right?
Right. That's
And
the
then there's
really long, skinny one that's fun to write zombie hand. Let's talk about zombie hand
let's
in a
talk about
minute.
Zombie Ham, one of my favorite fonts, of course.
Yeah.
So there's a fine one, and then there's like the art marker, the one that's about the size of a number 1.
Number
And then
one art marker.
then there's the one you just showed us. So what are the other 2?
So we also have the twin one.
The twin one. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yep.
different size than the other ones?
Yeah, it's slightly smaller than the art marker. So Brian, we really like to write 11 by 17. So it's
Right.
great for 11 by 17. It's going to be
Okay.
the biggest marker you use for that. And then the next one is the Fine One Flex. This
That
is
guy,
their
that's
smallest
right.
brush marker. Yeah, and it comes in all the colors, I believe. It's also empty, so you can put your own ink in it. And the black, they now have a 1SK. And the 1SK is one special black. K is black in printing terms. And so that 1SK, I had a friend test it for me just because, okay, so I gave her a marker and she says, I'll test it. Okay, go test it. And she loves to do watercolors. And she says, is this permanent? And I said, you tell me. So she did a bunch of tests and she did watercolor over them. And she said that the longer you let them dry, the more permanent they are.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dana's asking, what's the name of that super big art marker again? Well, wait a minute. Is that what you meant, Dana, or the other one? The super big art marker. Okay.
Yeah. So
The
it's
brush.
called the big one art.
Big one art.
So let's do this. I'm going to put a link in the chat to the lettering kit. And then there's the big one art. And then there's the small one is the Fine One Flex. And just because we're all here, I'm going to give you my ambassador code.
Yay. What does
Don't
that do
share-
for us?
It gives you 15% off your first order.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's my AMB. That's my ambassador code. You're welcome to use that for your first order. 15%.
So cool.
Yeah. But it
Thanks,
only
Heather.
works once. So make it last. Make it. I saw someone write, this is going to cost me. So I figured I'll save you some money.
So going back to the book,
It should work.
What I love about this is that you do, actually borrowing, since Mike Rohde's with us, also doing what Mike Rohde did, which is showing examples of other people's work that's in here.
Yes.
One of them being like Trent Wakenight, who's amazing. I will tell you the one that the lettering style that I use all the time. In fact, I can't really tell the difference between it and my own lettering, my own like handwriting anymore, is the Architects.
You've mastered it. You're great at it. I love seeing your posts on Instagram. Yeah.
Honestly, I forgot how to write. I forgot what my own handwriting is. It's like, that's it now, right?
I did it on purpose. I actually taught that lettering style on purpose because I know it's so close to our already handwriting.
Yeah.
And so I wanted people to be able to do something very quick and easy. And Architect is a fast way of doing that.
It's really, really great. And I just love the touches, just having the leg of the R. Let me get out of the way. The leg of the R just almost kick out almost vertically,
I'm gonna stop spotlighting myself for a second. What were you showing us?
So here, I'll tell you what, let me make myself a little bit smaller. Here we go. So on the Architects, just the touches to it. Let's see. Yeah. So how the
Page 105. Yep.
Page 105. Thanks for that. So just how the horizontals just sort of kick out, just a little bit, like how the R just is. It's a wide font. It's a wide
shaped like a
lettering
square.
style.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's my favorite. That's the one that I use all the time. What's your favorite of all of these different lettering styles that you share in the book? Do you have one? It's not the one you use all the time, but do you have one that it's got a special place in your heart?
In the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and I would say Wacky Western. And it's funny.
Western.
Yeah, and it's funny. And I love the one where it's written with the brush marker. I have to say the brush marker is my absolute favorite marker. So to be able to write Wacky Western with the brush marker is my favorite. And it's funny because it's like, I think it's because I truly do love serifs.
Mm-hmm.
Serif.
So I'm on
French
page
word.
64 and 65 if you've got the book.
Mm-hmm. And it was the easiest one for me. Now think about it. The very first one in the book is called Brick. Mm-hmm. And Brian, you said you liked that one.
Yep.
hate this one. I hate this lettering style. And it's because I'm not a straight letter person. It's almost impossible for me to write a a block S as well. Let's see. Let's find it in here. So here's
There's
my
your block
version
S,
of a
Dana.
block
There you go.
S. Right. But it's like, make it fun, put a brush letter to it. I don't know if this one's going to be any good. I mean, it's not a great S, but it's like fun to write with the brush marker. I just absolutely love
Yeah.
it. And of all the chapters, that's the one that came out the fastest. It was like it literally just threw itself up on a flip chart and I was done. I think I posted it and I hadn't even published the book yet. And I posted it. And Laura Lahai from Zeist, she grabbed it and started lettering with it before I even came out with the book. So she's my left hand. She's my left hand in Europe. So she and I teach lefty classes together.
Well, I know you said that brick was the toughest one for you.
Yeah.
If I remember the backstory, and I could be misremembering, wasn't there there was a bit of a tribute behind this one? Didn't this one have something to do with Sheila Waters, if I'm remembering that correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Sheila Waters, who recently passed, she taught me how to write Roman hand. And I found out that Sheila Waters lived near us, sort of. She was still an hour and a half away with no traffic when I was living in Washington, D.C. And she took students every other Sunday. And so I would go to her studio. In my very first session with her, she made me write, and I don't know if you can see it, but she made me write these little boxes, squares with circles in them, and these special little lines, this big one and then this one. And I did that for 4 hours. And then she said, now fill them full of letters. And then I did that for 4 hours. And I was so sick of writing circles and boxes because you have to get those proportions just right that I went home and I made a template in Illustrator. So it's completely mathematically perfect. And I took it to her 2 weeks later and she looked at it and she says, how do I know these are right? So I pulled out my laptop and I showed her. I opened up the little screen that showed how many inches it was. And she didn't say anything. She just grabbed the copy and she went over to the copy machine and she made a bunch of copies. And she says, I'm going to use this to teach my students. And I said, can I use it too? And she said, yes. So that's where the tribute in the book came. Yep.
Nice. I love that backstory.
Yeah.
So I want to open it up to others. If you probably have a bunch of questions for Heather while you're coming off mute and thinking of what it is you want to ask. I just have a couple more. So now that you've written the book and you're wildly successful and you're doing all these speaking events and you've got, not only do you have Let's Letter Together, you've also got Tech Host Academy. How has your life changed since you've got this book now? What's different?
It's a really expensive business card, really. That's kind of what it is. But what it did allow me to do, I like to see those who I know who wrote books in the chat. Yeah, you know this. But what it allowed me to do, and actually before the book was even published, is it allowed me to take 2 European tours, and it took me over to Australia. It really helped me travel the world and meet other visual practitioners. I think in my first European lettering tour, I had about 80 students, which was great. It's what allowed me to travel for 5 weeks across Europe. The second one, I had about 120 students, and we got to do a retreat, which was fantastic. Actually, it was an entire manor in somewhere in, I think it was in Oxfordshire, England, which was great. So it really helped me see the world. And I think I really blossomed at that time. Then the pandemic hit. I was literally coming back from my last European lettering tour. Pandemic hit and haven't traveled since. So that's been a big, huge shift. And I'm sure for all of us, we've all experienced something different. But
well,
yeah.
that begs the next question, which is what's next for you?
Well, the European Lettering Tour 3 has been on hold for a very, very long time. It's still going to happen. Part of that is going to be, again, a retreat, probably somewhere in Europe, where I'm either looking. I love the Netherlands. I just absolutely love the Netherlands. I'd like to go there, but I'm getting a lot of calls from people that want me to come to Switzerland and France. But the rest of Europe is like, no, it's too expensive over there. So I don't know how that's going to work out. A week in Neuland, and then I think we're going to take a month and drive around the UK. And there I'll probably be doing a lot of classes in the UK for people who want to take it.
Amazing.
But,
let us know when tickets go
yeah.
on sale for that. Any questions for Heather? And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so we can keep it to under an hour. All right. But Heather, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
this. Don't go anywhere. We'll get to the after party in just a second. Joe, did you have something you wanted to say? Question?
Yeah, it's not a question, but if we've got a second, I just want to drop another plug on that drilling kind of concept.
Mhm.
I was in architecture school, and they basically told us, you don't know how to letter. You'll never letter like that again. Everybody letters like this. We had to do 1 to 2 page journals every day, and it had to be exact, and it was graded. Every little mark was graded. And then we got to develop our own styles. It's kind of a brute force method, but it works.
And that's
Yeah.
how it's done.
I have to tell you, I met 3 architects last weekend because we had this big studio tour, and there were a lot of architects for some reason that went on the studio tour, and they would, I'd ask them what they do. Oh, I'm an architect. And then I would immediately grab the book and then apologize for what I was about to show them, which was my architect lettering style. And did you know that all 3 of them had never had to take lettering in college? And I was blown away. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Every architect I've ever met had to take semesters of this. And they said, nope, we never had to take it. And they're signing up for my class, which is great. I love that. But it just fascinates me. I know that the level of practice that architects just 10 years ago had to study. And when I went, and the reason why I chose to add architect to the book, I can't remember if this was a lettering style before the book or not. I don't think so. But what really, really kicked it off was that I got to see the Price Tower in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which is Frank Lloyd Wright's only skyscraper. And I got to see the whole bottom level was examples of his work. So I spent the entire day studying all of his work. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing your journey with us, and everybody go check out Lettering Journey by Heather Martinez. Let's everybody give her a big round of applause. Yay. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you, everyone. Feel free to stick around. I'm happy to answer questions and pull out more markers and give you more resources. Just let me know.